In these perilous times, see from current events how biblical prophecy is coming to pass in front of our eyes. You're watching In the Last Days, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. With Martin and Natalie Blackham, thank you to our friends and partners who make this program possible. Now, here's Martin and Natalie.
Shalom, dear friend. This is so wonderful to be with you today. And we are in Jerusalem, just next to Jerusalem on the mountain in Harada. And I have the privilege today to present you Norman Feingold. He's a friend, he's a colleague. We are working together with Christian Friends of Magen David Adom. And this is a real opportunity on In the Last Days TV program to present you Norman. And he is going to speak to you about the history, why Israel is so important, that you can be Christian and a Zionist. You don't need to be just a Jew and a Zionist. And also how we want also to see a relationship growing between Christian and Jews. And here we go. Norman.
Well, let me introduce myself. My name, as you just heard, is Norman Feingold. I was born in Manchester a long time ago, 89 years ago. And I live in a beautiful seaside resort called Netanya, by the beach, by the Mediterranean, by the blue seas. It's wonderful to be in Israel, and it's wonderful to be part and parcel of the great dream of the Jewish people returning back to this ancient land. There's so much to talk about in how we got here, how we're coming here, how we're progressing, how we're developing, and what we are doing. I would like to take you back just a number of years ago to the late 50s to the 60s as a commencement. And I would like to tell you a story about the return of the Jewish people. The return of the Jewish people, there were 600,000 people in this land when the State of Israel was formed in 1948. Today there are over 6 million Jews and growing. Plus other populations, making 7 million population in total. But the Jewish people, the prophecies, the prophets, they shall return from the four corners of the earth, from the north and from the south, from the east and from the west. They will rebuild the land. They will cultivate the land. But most of all, they will live in the land. That is a return. Let me tell you how, in a way, I became involved. For nigh on 6 years, long years for me, I was an officer at sea during the Second World War. I sailed the oceans. I traveled to the South Americas, to Peru and Chile on one side, to the Argentine on the Atlantic side. I traveled to India, to the old Bombay. I traveled to Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. I travelled all over the world, to South Africa. I was in Cape Town, and I was in Dar es Salaam, and I was in Suez, and I was all over. And I looked at the world through open eyes, the eyes of a young man, exploring the world in the midst of a great adventure, the adventure of the Second World War. And I was fighting for my country. I was part of my country, but I was fighting an evil concept. I was fighting Hitler. I was fighting the Nazis. I was fighting against the destruction of the Jewish people. But when I first went to sea, I had very, very little realization of what it was about. I was brought up in a religious family, and I felt that I was a Jew, and proud to be a Jew, as I am to this very, very day. But nevertheless, I knew little about the Holocaust. And during my sea years, I was an internationalist. I believe that black, white, all colours were all the same, God's children. I believe that we were made in God's image, and it did distinguish between Jew and Christian, or Christian and anybody else. He said we were made, Betzalmo, in his image. And that's the way I was brought up, that's the way I was taught. So I was an internationalist. I didn't see barriers. I saw no barriers. But then as the war came to its close, and the evils of Hitler and his Nazis were revealed, I saw that before I cured the world, I was involved in curing the problems of my own people. My own people had been dispersed. They'd been persecuted. They'd been harrowed. They'd been treated with ignominy. And I was frightened for them. And I was scared, not for myself. I thought I was an Englishman. As far as I was concerned, I was born into a democratic country. I was very fortunate. But what about my Jewish people from Germany, or from the Russias, from Latvia, from Lithuania, from Estonia, from Romania, from Hungary, and on and on and on? What about my Jews who in their lifetime and their grandparents' lifetime suffered not only from ghettos, but suffered from pogroms, who were beaten not because they were bad people, but because they were Jews? And what about the 1.5 million children that went into the gas chambers? They didn't go in because they were evil. They went in because they were Jewish, from Jewish blood, and their parents and the grandparents, the righteous and the not so righteous, the caring and the not so caring. No distinction. If your grandmother was Jewish, you went into the gas chamber. All this was revealed, but only revealed at the end of the war. We were not aware. Maybe some people in high places were aware, but I was not aware. I was busy doing my job as a radio officer, and I sailed the seas, across the oceans, always with my eye towards British victory. I didn't see it as American victory, and I didn't see it as French victory. I saw it as British victory against the Hun, against the German. Nevertheless, the war came, the war went. And I decided then, at this early stage in my life, when I was a young man, that I would become involved in helping the Jews to return. So now I would like to tell you one or two stories that I experienced one way or the other. I would like to go to Romania in about 1959, 1960. We were buying Jews. We were paying £200 sterling a head. You can translate that into dollars. $300, $400. It was like buying cattle out of a cattle auction, or fish of a fish slab. You put the money on the table and you receive your human being, you receive your Jew. The slavery of yesteryear in the Americas has to be remembered. But the slavery of the Jewish people has to be remembered too. In the midst of Passover, I say over and over again, Avadim hayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim. Slaves we were to Pharaoh in Egypt. I don't see great distinctions between slavery to the German and slavery to the Pharaoh. I don't see much distinction between the overseer whipping the Jew, which brought about the actions of Moses, and the distinction of the SS and the German who wanted to destroy the Jew. But I see a big distinction. I see the distinction of the ignorance of the majority of the German people who followed blindly the edicts and the thoughts and the demands of Hitler and his cronies. And if only we had an educated world, if only we had people that understood that Jewish people were chosen by the Almighty to receive the Torah at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, that the Jews were brought along to polish the world with the wonderful shining examples of monotheism, that there is one God and one God only, No more Jupiters, no more Apollos, no more Thors. Just one great Almighty God. So I became involved as a young man. And here's the story, it's a true story, from Romania. I became great friends with a man called Zavi Garci, who lived in Haifa in Israel. But his special job was with the Jewish Agency to greet people that were being brought to the land of Israel from Eastern Europe. His base was in Vienna. And as people came up the train from a long journey, a 36-hour journey from Hungary and places such, or Romania, he had a little Magen David, a little shield of David behind his lapel. And he opened his lapel, looked at the people, and says, come, come, in shalom, come with peace. You're going to the land of Israel. There's a rebirth for you, as there is a rebirth for the Jewish nation. Come, come with me. Wipe away the tears, wipe away the doubts. Just again, you take your thoughts and look at your thoughts only as future thoughts. You and your children come along, be part and parcel of the renaissance, the redemption of the Jewish people. That was his job.
Was he part of something? Was he part of
a Jewish agency? His job, that was his job, official job, to greet them, to give them peace of mind, to make them feel that they were wanted and that they just weren't running away from horror, but they were coming into sunshine and light and brightness, into a future for them and their families and their children and their grandchildren. He said to me, he said, Norman, he said, I'd like to tell you one story. One day, I stood at the station, a station in Vienna, waiting for a train which had come from Romania. Let me tell you the story. It's a 36-hour journey, or so it was, in a very bare railway carriage all the way from Romania to Vienna. Vienna being the first station in the free world, coming away from the Russian influences. He says one day there was a man and a woman in Romania that received a visa. The visa cost £200 sterling, as I have told you, for each and every one. But the Romanian law at the time was such, if you didn't take advantage of the visa and if you didn't go immediately and leave that land of Romania, you didn't get a second chance. Unfortunately, this man was in a hospital, a Romanian hospital, in a very, very sore condition. And the visa came. 3 visas, man, woman, and a little girl. So the wife went to the husband in hospital, and she said to him, what shall we do? We've got our visas of exit, and you're ill in hospital. What should we do? We can't leave you behind, and are you fit to take with? And the man said, remember this, my darling, we live in a town called Iași in Romania, where 10,000 Jews were hung off lampposts and beheaded during the Nazi period. They weren't destroyed by the Nazis, they were destroyed by the Romanian Iron Guard. All our life we've talked about the land of Israel. Every Passover we've said, B'Hashana Haba'ah Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. It's been a spiritual prayer. Here we have a golden chance for our daughter's sake to make it into a realistic prayer, a prayer of tomorrow. We must go. So they left the town of Yassi. He was put on the train with his wife and with his child. He was sorely ill. On the train, he died. When Zvi Garci, this man I talked about, when he walked to the train and he saw this woman come off, he said, Norman, I'd never seen anybody so distraught, so disturbed, so anguished. I knew there was something wrong. And I said, show him my little Magen David Adam. Come, Im Shalom. Put it all behind you. You're here. She says, no, 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 no. You come with me. And she took him back into the compartment of the railway train. And there, sitting between two carriage seats, sitting on the floor, was a little girl, aged about 8 years of age, rocking to and fro as I would rock a baby, a dead father. He said the stench of death permeated the compartment of the train. You could feel it, you could smell it. He said, questions, ask the questions. How comes a little girl, aged 8, should be nursing her dead father? Couldn't she call a policeman? Call a policeman? The answer was no. They'd come from a land of jackboots and policemen. They were petrified of policemen. They did not know the difference between free Austria and the Romania that they came from. They could not ask a policeman. They couldn't call for help. So the girl sat, the little girl, with her despair, with her anguish, with the tears trickling down her cheeks. She sat with her dead father, and the mother sat in her anguish. And she came off the train because she knew she'd reached the destination. And she pondered and thought, who can she go to? Nobody official. And then she saw Zvi Garci with his little badge and his welcoming, come in shalom. And she says, come with me into the train. And there he went. And there was that little girl. Brings tears to my eyes as I think of it. Nursing a dead dad. There's only one question to be asked. Who put him on the train? What kind of a condition was he in when he got onto the train? Who was there to help him? Who was there to succor him? Who was there to guide him? Who was there to love him, to care? His wife and his child, but virtually nobody else. As I told you before, the Romanian police took him out of the hospital. They put him on the train, and we buried him in Israel. The wife and daughter, they've grown up now, the years have gone by. I don't know what's happened, but I know she joined the army, that girl, in Israel. And that's a story, a true story. Comes from Zvi Garci. He was a wonderful man with a lovely wife, Sivia, who dedicated his life virtually to the rescue of Jews. So it's not always easy pie to come back to the land of Israel. Let me tell you another story. A number of years ago, I brought a group from England, of people who belong to an organization which I formed called Achdut. Achdut meaning unity. It's the unity of the Jewish people. And we were raising money and dedicating ourselves to raise these £200 and other monies to bring Jews from various countries. And one day, my late father lived in Haifa, was with me, and a group from Achdut, from this group, we went down to the port of Haifa to greet a boat called the Moledet, meaning birthland, which plied up and down the Mediterranean, picking Jews up. They came via Marseille, whichever way, and one way or the other. We got them from Morocco, we got them from all over. I stood on that boat, and I'd like to tell you about people that came off. My Hebrew was limited. My Yiddish was nil. My French was nil, so to speak. I saw there on the boat, I saw with my own eyes a man. He looked ancient to me, much older than I feel, and with him was a lady, an old lady, fully dressed in rags. Against the breast she was holding an ancient enamel basin. She'd brought it from Morocco. It was chipped, it was black, but she held it to her breast. These scraggy breasts. There's no weight to the lady, no shape, no form to the lady. And I saw she sat on sacking on board the boat. And her husband was blind, sitting next to her. And I looked at them. Again, I thought and I pondered. They came from the caves of the Atlas Mountains. They knew not the difference between a telephone box and a flush toilet. They'd never seen a telephone box, and they'd never seen a flush toilet. And they sat there as the boat had come in. And then I watched them, she clutching a basin, very little position. They had 20-odd great children, grandchildren and children and grandchildren already living in Israel. They were the last of their family, the very last to come from the Atlas Mountains. And I watched the man with the little old lady. He had a white stick. As they came down the gangplank of the boat to the quayside, he was tapping the boat from side to side, the gangplank, with his white stick. Again, the tears were dripping out of these sightless eyes. But their face was lit up with a brilliant light, the light of redemption. This man was returning beyond his dreams. He could never have dreamt of it. Returning to the land of Israel. After all those years, this was his redemption. He knew very well he could get very little. He knew very well that he was late on in years, that his period of time was limited. He knew that. He was not a foolish man. He spoke no Hebrew.
But he was going to be back with his family too.
He was coming back to his family, but he was coming to the land of Israel. The light was shining on his face. It was resplendent. It really was. And I tried to take a movie of this. By the way, I'd borrowed a movie camera from a friend of mine, but somehow or other I made a mess of it and it didn't work. And I was so sorry afterwards, because to see a man like this, he represented thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews. He was one, but he was only one of many. There were 600,000 Jews in the land of Israel in 1948. There are 6 million now. Look at the difference. If in Great Britain, where I lived, if you could multiply their population tenfold, 100-fold, in 50 years, 60 years, people would be living on the rooftops. They couldn't cope. Israel absorbed. Israel welcomed. Israel taught. Israel had teaching colleges. Israel gave them back to the land of their forefathers, and they drank the wine of their inheritance. It's beautiful. And the Shabbat became Shabbat for these people, with congregations and with fellow citizens. They weren't in isolation any longer. They weren't looking over the shoulders to be repudiated or to be castigated. They were looking over the shoulder in the past, but looking forward to a bright golden future with their fellow brothers and sisters and all their lovely grandchildren, etc., in the land of Israel. They were looking forward to a land of sunshine, from the caves of the Atlas Mountains to the glory of Israel. What a magnificent journey. It's in our lifetime. By the way, Christians have helped so much along in this journey. Christians have helped to pay for this redemption of the Jewish people. Christians have helped to participate and be part and parcel of this wonderful return, a 2,000 years dispersion and a golden return. And therefore, the support for the state of Israel should be ongoing. I work as a volunteer. I'm a volunteer. I've been a volunteer all my life for the Magen David Adom, the ambulance service of the state of Israel. We save life. We pick up the stranger. We pick up the Christian, the Muslim. We pick up the Druze. We pick up the Jew. We pick up everybody who needs that little bit of help to get to the hospital. You know, if I had to reconsider and think all about Christianity and my relationship with Christians, which is tremendous, I would think of the teachings of the New Testament, and I would say to you, you know, and all said and done, there were 36 miracles attributed to Jesus in the New Testament, 25 of which are to do with healing. When you bring Jews from Romania, when you bring Jews from Morocco, when you pick up a Jew or a non-Jew who's had an accident in the road, you're to do with healing, spiritual as well as physical.
It's so true. And you know, friends, it's so wonderful. We are working together. We're doing some program today together, but we're working together, and it's like Jews and Christians together. And we will carry on another program for next week. And we want to leave you with all these stories.
I have one marvelous story to tell you.
We will. No, next week we're going to do it. And we want to leave you this story. We want you to know these stories. And like, it's our responsibility now also as Christians to help the Jewish people to come back, because they need help. And with the thing that we've done in the past, is a privilege now for us to be able to help. So we will see you next week, and we'll tell you again more stories. Norman will have some more stories for you. And from us here in Israel, we say shalom to you, and we bless you out of Zion. Bye-bye.
You've been watching In the Last Days, a TV program with Martin and Natalie Blackham, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. If you would like to financially support the program or find out about conferences, meetings or ministry products, then please contact us with the details on your screen. Visit our easy-to-use website at www.inthelastdays.com and register for our free e-newsletter. Get the latest news from Israel, product information, online video teaching, or watch today's TV program at a time that's convenient to you. Thank you again, friends and partners, for making this program possible.
See you same time, same station for the next program from In the Last Days.